This channel was supposed to be made back in 2020, but we didn't upload our first video until the end of 2022. Why? I'll explain. Let's talk. Back in 2020, when New Zealand was imploding before our eyes, people were either fighting over masks or fist fighting over toilet paper. I was working through Corona at my local avocado orchard, where I had been employed for the last 5 years as a general labourer, tractor driver, and all-around slave, when the idea to make a YouTube channel came to me. You see, our staff was stretched quite thin at the time, stress was high and the virus didn't help. And so at around March 2020, during the first lockdown, our boss came to us and asked, who would like to work through lockdown? For anyone wondering, our business was essential so we could in fact keep operating. And so those were our two options. You could either go home and still get paid, or keep working like a good little boy and keep the business running. And so what did I do? Are you fucking kidding me? We get to go home, eat whenever we want, wake up whenever we want, and still get paid? I stayed and worked out of loyalty. A mistake I'll never make again. You see, we only had 4 primary staff members at the time. We used to have 8, but 4 left. And out of those 4, how much do you think stayed and worked through lockdown? 2. Me, who was 22 at the time, and a young man named Byron, who was 16, maybe 17, I can't remember. The point is we stayed. And at the time we weren't even complacent, because we found out soon after that our numbers would go up a little bit via the local beekeepers who were offering up some of their staff to help us get by. And although they weren't really trained to do what we do, and the stress of being the only 2 primary workers to take the brunt of the workload was immense, we didn't give a fuck. Because in me and Byron's mind, when the top brass, the head honchos, find out that these 2 young lads decided to stay and keep their orchard running, we'd be treated like gods. Or better yet, get a fucking pay raise. And so months down the line, when the lockdowns, at least for us, were alleviated, and the 2 workers that had decided not to work through the first lockdown came back, you could colour me damn well surprised when the head honchos, the top brass that we tried to impress by working through lockdown, didn't give a fuck that me and Byron stayed. 5 years of my life, at the exact same pay, willing to work through COVID, was a very big mistake, because they didn't give a fuck. I knew my days were numbered, because on top of the stress I was dealing with at home, a topic for another video, and the stress I was dealing with at work, as it just so happens to be a very labour-intensive, time-important job, my boss said 2 things to me that absolutely drained all the little passion I had left for the place. The first thing he said was that because we had lost half of our workforce, we had to pick up the slack. Yeah, the slack of 4 people. Of course there was the beekeepers, and a couple of old people would come in on odd times here and there, but they weren't on full-time contracts, and the primary bulk of pressure and responsibility still fell on us. Could they hire 4 more people on full-time contracts, therefore balancing out the responsibility and workload? Yeah. Did they do that? No. And why would they? They already had 4 slaves to do the job, and so we did. Did we like it? No. But who gives a shit? They certainly didn't. And the second thing he said, which was somewhat that hammer that would smack the last nail in the coffin, was when he disciplined me. Why did he discipline me? Because I was going too slow. Now to give you some context, I was way ahead of my other colleagues by a fucking mile. And there's 2 other colleagues that chose not to work through the first lockdown. They were of older age. I think they were in their mid to late 50s. And so when I told my boss, but sir, I'm way ahead of these guys, he said that doesn't cut it, because I should be even more ahead of them because I'm young and they're old. There's only one problem with that though. We don't get paid based on our age. And even funnier than that, they were getting paid more than me. And even funnier than that, I had been there almost 2 years longer than them. I saw their first day. And even funnier than that, I had been there longer than my boss. I saw his first day. In fact, I helped him find the parking lot and the rubbish bins he was that fucking lost. And so it hurt me when he then decided to discipline me in the middle of the orchard just because I asked, well then do I get the young person pay? And with that, my passion for the place was waning, my home life was getting worse, and the YouTube channel I had dreamt of making faded into the noise of the world. A world that still wasn't done with me, because just after New Year's, 1 week into 2021, when I was more than willing to put 2020 in my rearview mirror, this happened. I flipped the car quite a few times, but came out completely unscathed. Physically. Mentally, I went downhill. Story for another time. Fast forward to the 16th of May 2022, 1 year after that car crash, because on that day, I sent this picture. That's right, this is the first version of what would eventually become the Below Average Boys logo. And who did I send this picture to? Christian. Because a few days before this picture was sent, Christian came to my house and we got wasted. And while getting wasted, our conversation shifted towards making a podcast. Me and him. And I thought it was the perfect fit because Christian is a really good, reliable friend who has gotten me through some tough times without even knowing it. Now, I had already made a name for this podcast. It was going to be called Bearsies with the Boys. Here's the logo I created for it. It never ended up being called Bearsies with the Boys, of course, because Christian did it. He said, no, let's call it the Below Average Boys. And the rest is history. That name stuck with me because that's what we are, just a couple of below average boys who have admittedly done below average things. And that's where you guys come in. And the real reason I'm making this video, because I'd like to thank you guys for getting us well past 100 subscribers. One of the reasons we made this was for any below average or average Kiwis to have a place to chill. It's not the only reason, in fact there's a whole list of reasons, but this one relates to you. When me and Christian made this channel, we thought it would flop, no one would care and would go on our merry way. But your guys' support has made this thing very viable. And the kind words you guys have sent me, I'm very lucky to have supporters like you. So especially if you've made it to this part of the video, thank you guys. From the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. Now I don't know what or where this channel will go, but I can promise you one thing. We might have caught ourselves below average boys, but we're gunning for the top. Stay safe, and I'll see you when I see you.
I see places and faces and things you ain't never thought about thinking. If you ain't peeped, then you must be drinking and smoking, pretending that you're looking, but you're broken. Let me get you open.